Everett Holt sat by the small pool in his backyard, staring out as his wife, Lyra, and their best friend Matt splashed around in the surf of the Gulf of Mexico. In the past, these moments filled him with pride. Watching them laugh and play in the water had always been a symbol of their shared dream coming true. They had escaped the cold, gloomy winters of their northern hometown and made a life for themselves under the warm Florida sun. This was their slice of paradise. But today, Everett wasn't focused on how far they'd come. His mind was stuck on the rumors, the whispers that had followed them all the way back from high school and never truly died out. As he watched Matt and Lyra play in the waves, his gut twisted with unease. His surroundings, once a source of joy, faded into the background. What mattered now was what was happening right in front of him, the unsettling reality taking shape in the sand and surf. Up until last week, Everett could have sworn he loved Matt and Lyra more than anyone else in the world. For years, he had trusted them with everything. His heart, his happiness, even his soul. They had been inseparable, like pieces of the same puzzle. When one of them hurt, they all did. When one found joy, they all shared in it. Now, though, that trust was crumbling. It felt misplaced, like a foundation built on sand. The three of them had been close since the first day of middle school, finding themselves seated in the same homeroom. It didn't take long for them to form a bond that carried them through high school and, for Everett and Lyra, college. Matt had always been different, though. He was a classic slacker, an aspiring beach bum before he even lived near a beach. Ambition was never his strong suit. He dressed like a surfer and talked in a mix of beach slang and drug culture jargon. While Everett never saw him touch hard drugs, Matt had been well acquainted with weed and alcohol for as long as Everett could remember. Women, for reasons Everett could never fully understand, were drawn to him like moths to a flame. He was handsome, tanned, and seemed to know just the right things to say. Matt could have had almost any woman he wanted, and it often seemed like he did. Everett used to believe Matt had drawn the line at Lyra, out of respect for their friendship. But now, he wasn't so sure. After high school, the trio had applied to colleges together, determined to stay close. The only requirement for their choice was that it had to be in Florida. Reputation and academic programs were secondary to the promise of warm weather and sandy beaches. They were all accepted into the same college and, naturally, moved in together. It only took Matt a semester to drop out, deciding college wasn't for him. He drifted to the beaches around Fort Myers, living hand-to-mouth, while Everett and Lyra continued their studies. Weekends and summers still saw the three of them together, their friendship seemingly as strong as ever. While Everett and Lyra were busy pursuing their degrees, Matt was piecing together a living with part-time jobs, all centered around the beach. He worked for a pool company at times, sometimes in beachside businesses, and eventually found his niche at a beach rental shop. Matt had a knack for selling. He could talk tourists into renting anything, even things they didn't need. Everett figured it was his laid-back surfer dude persona that did the trick. People ate it up. After graduating, Everett and Lyra quickly found jobs. Lyra landed a position at a beachside boutique, rising swiftly to assistant manager, while Everett took a job at the equipment rental outlet where Matt worked. Everett moved up fast, becoming the store manager and second in command to the owner. The three of them remained as close as ever, working within half a mile of each other. Everett and Matt, sharing the same employer, crossed paths multiple times a day. And many times Matt would mention how he and Lyra had grabbed lunch together, or how they had spent their breaks hanging out. The rumors started up again, whispers that there was something more between Matt and Lyra, but Everett, as he always had, brushed them off. They were old friends. Why wouldn't they spend time together? Lyra had already dated Matt back in their younger years and found him unsuitable as a life partner. She had chosen Everett. He was the one she married. What was there to worry about? Aside from women and the beach, there was one thing Matt loved above all else: cars. His passion for iconic cars ran deep. Whenever a conversation veered toward cars, Matt was right there in the thick of it, always talking about his favorite, the Dodge Charger. His very first car had been a Charger, and so had every car since. Recently, after years of saving up, Matt finally got his hands on something special. It wasn't just any Charger. It was a Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat, gleaming in plum-crazy purple with black accents. When he wasn't chasing women or lounging by the beach, his time was spent polishing, babying, and upgrading that Hellcat, his true love. Lyra was the first to ride in the new car, and Everett had seen her many times afterward, cruising around with Matt in the passenger seat. He remembered the good days, the road trips, camping trips, and lazy afternoons hanging out. Lyra had always been there for both of them, but she was his. Only his. She had assured him that she and Matt were just friends, nothing more. But now, as the memories flooded back, Everett realized she had likely been more than just a friend all along. She never admitted to being a friend with benefits, but it seemed that was exactly what she was, both then and now. It was only the past week that the ugly truth had finally slapped him in the face. Lyra's disrespect and infidelity laid bare. Those rumors that had haunted him for years, they were true. Every last one of them. Everett almost regretted volunteering to deliver that scaffolding on the day his world came crashing down. He had been bored, and the client had insisted the scaffolding was urgently needed, so Everett told his boss he'd make the delivery. If he hadn't, he could have remained blissfully ignorant for a while longer. But fate had other plans. His stomach churned with anger as he recalled the events of that day. It had been a beautiful day, clear skies and sunshine, and business was slow, just a typical Tuesday. When the call for the scaffolding came in, Everett told Mr. Colburn he would handle it himself, saving the driver from having to work late. It was a win-win. The client would be happy, and Everett would get out of the store for a bit. But that quick decision led to his downfall. On the way back to the store, Everett took the beach road, passing by Lyra's and Matt's workplaces. Just as he neared the small rundown building where Matt worked, he saw something that turned his stomach. Lyra meeting Matt outside with a heated kiss. Matt's hands slipped under her loose blouse, groping her breasts for a moment before he hurriedly ushered her inside. As they entered the building, his hand slid under her skirt, and she turned toward him with a giggle. She bent slightly at the waist, grabbing his arm as they backed into the store, smiling all the while. The door closed behind them, and she pulled Matt in for another long, hungry kiss. There was no mistaking it. This time, Lyra was the one taking the lead. Matt quickly flipped the sign to "closed for lunch" and followed Lyra deeper into the building. She laughed, pulling him along by the hand. Fury coursed through Everett's veins. He jerked his new Ram 1500 Rebel into the parking lot beside Matt's Hellcat and almost sprinted toward the building. The door was locked, the lights off, and no one was in sight. They had to be in the stockroom. Without thinking, Everett crept around the side of the building, dragging a garbage can beneath a high, grimy window. Pulling himself up just enough to peer inside, he strained to catch a glimpse of what was happening. He could hear voices but couldn't make out the words. Frustrated, he jumped down, stacked a couple of nearby pallets on top of the garbage can, and climbed back up. This time, he had a better view, and what he saw shattered his world. Everett felt his heart drop as he stumbled upon Lyra and Matt in a moment he could hardly believe was real. Lyra was leaning against the stack of boxes, her clothes disheveled and intimate details exposed in a way that left no room for doubt. Matt was close to her, their movements unmistakable, and the air seemed heavy with a shared intensity. Everett could hear her voice, a soft murmur, almost a sigh, an intimate exchange that struck him like a lightning bolt. His hands shaking, Everett pulled out his phone and snapped several pictures. He then climbed down, his mind spinning with rage and disbelief. He felt utterly lost. Like everything he had known had been ripped away from him in a matter of moments. His perfect life had been obliterated in the span of a single horrifying afternoon. When Everett returned to work, Mr. Colburn knew something was wrong, but Everett refused to discuss it. All he could manage to say was, "I just realized that things aren't always what they seem. Something I thought I knew turned out to be a lie, and now I've got to rethink everything." Everett snapped out of his reverie, yanked back to the present by the sight of his wife, Lyra, and his former best friend, Matt, laughing and wrestling in the surf. His heart clenched as Lyra's joyful screams and giggles echoed in his ears, accompanied by Matt's booming laughter. They looked so carefree, so at ease. The scene would have seemed innocent if Everett hadn't already learned the truth. As he watched them, plans formed and crumbled in his mind, one after the other. He kept thinking, kept plotting, but nothing stuck. His gaze wandered around their backyard, taking in the house and the pool. He was going to miss this place, maybe even more than he'd missed Matthias, perhaps almost as much as he had missed Lyra. At least they hadn't bought the house outright, just a lease-to-own deal. That small mercy meant walking away would sting a little less. Lost in his thoughts, Everett didn't realize Lyra had emerged from the surf until she was running toward him, still holding Matt's hand. Her face glowed with happiness, the same flirtatious energy that had drawn Everett to her years ago. He had loved her bubbly personality, her constant cheerfulness, the way she was always affectionate. But now he wondered if he should have questioned that warmth when she directed it at others, even after they were engaged and married. He had brushed it off, convinced it was just who she was, until now. Now he saw it for what it really was, a flirtatious cheat. As Lyra came closer, she let go of Matt's hand, still catching her breath from their swim. "Why the gloomy face?" she asked, panting slightly. "It's a gorgeous day, and we're all together. What's got you so down?" She leaned in for a kiss, but Everett turned his face slightly, letting her lips brush against the side of his. "Nothing you don't already know, Lyra," he replied, forcing a tight smile. "Just thinking about last week. Some issues came up at work. I'll figure it out soon enough." He paused and then added, "So, why are you in such a good mood this afternoon?" Lyra's smile faltered just a little as she glanced over at Matt. Everett recognized that look, though it held a different meaning now. It wasn't just friendship behind her eyes. It was something more. "Well," she began, "we've had a great swim, Matt and I, and now we're ready for a good meal and some time to relax. What are you planning to cook for us tonight?" "Oh, so I'm the designated cook again?" Everett chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Seems like I'm always the one cooking, even when we're at Matt's place. Doesn't seem fair, does it?" He shook his head. "I didn't really give it any thought. Been busy with that work problem, you know. Maybe you and Matt can figure something out. Or we could just make sandwiches." Lyra's eyes sparkled as she grabbed Matt's hand again. "Oh, come on, Everett. You always make such great meals for us on the weekends. It's one of the best parts, watching you cook while the sun sets, then sitting down together to enjoy it. I can't believe you let that slip today." She giggled and then turned toward Matt. "I know what we can do. You can chill some wine and set the table, and Matt can take me for a spin in his Dodge. We'll pick up some takeout from that new restaurant downtown and eat out here on the patio. It'll be perfect." Without waiting for a response, Lyra dashed inside to change into a sundress and sandals. When she returned, she was all smiles again. "Come on, Matt, let's hit the road." She tugged Matt toward the front door, her eyes gleaming with excitement. As she turned back toward Everett, she said, "We'll probably be gone for about an hour and a half, honey. Gotta give them time to get the food ready. I'll call when we're on our way back." With that, she and Matt slipped out the door, and moments later, the rumble of the Hellcat's engine filled the air, followed by the screech of tires. Everett stood frozen, the front door still swaying slightly in its frame. This had happened before, plenty of times actually, but now it felt different, more brazen. Or maybe he was just seeing it for what it really was. They had been pulling stunts like this since middle school, always finding reasons to run errands together, leaving Everett behind. He had never thought much of it. Sometimes he and Lyra would run off and leave Matt alone too. Back then, it was just innocent fun. But now, Everett wasn't so sure. He sighed and returned to the patio, slumping back into his chair. He brought his glass and the bottle of Balvenie with him, pouring another drink. He didn't bother chilling the wine or setting the table. He didn't even move when nearly 2 hours later, Lyra called, giggling, to say they were on their way back. He simply sat there, drinking, his mind numb to everything except the slow burn of alcohol in his veins. When Lyra and Matt finally returned, she was laughing as they walked through the front door, their footsteps loud as they clomped through the house and burst into the kitchen. Lyra emerged onto the patio, her laughter abruptly stopping when she saw the still untouched table. "Everett!" she exclaimed. "What on earth have you been doing? I thought you were going to chill some wine and set the table while we were gone. It doesn't look like you've moved at all. What's wrong with you today? Hurry up and get the table ready. We're starving." Everett looked at her, sadness clouding his eyes. Her appearance said everything he needed to know. Her hair was tousled, her lips swollen and red, and her nipples were visible through the thin fabric of her top. She wasn't wearing a bra anymore. He was certain she had been when they left. Somehow, Lyra seemed oblivious to his expression, continuing to scold him for not preparing the meal. Meanwhile, Matt unpacked the food onto the table, but avoided Everett's gaze. Everett said nothing, rising quietly and walking into the kitchen. When he returned, he carried only his own plate and silverware. He served himself from the takeout containers and sat down, already eating by the time Lyra stormed inside to fetch plates for herself and Matt. As she came back out, she grumbled under her breath, berating Everett once again for not setting the table. "I'm tired," Everett replied simply, not looking up. "You could have easily grabbed your own plates and silverware. It wouldn't have taken much effort." Matt finally spoke, his voice heavy with frustration. "Dude, this is messed up, man. Why are you acting like this? We went to get some great food, and now you're sitting here acting like a jerk. What gives, man? You've got an amazing woman, and you're treating her like this. We're bros, man. You gotta have my back." Everett's eyes darkened as he stared at his plate, his silence heavier than words. Everett locked eyes with Matt, his anger rising in waves. He then shot a glance at Lyra, who looked down at her plate, avoiding the tension between the two men. Focusing back on Matt, Everett said, "You know what, Matt? I'm not sure how this became any of your business. This is my house, and what I do here is up to me. You've gotten used to me footing the bill every time we're together, handling everything like a servant, but that's about to change. From now on, I plan to kick back and relax on weekends, just like you and Lyra. So, yeah, you're going to have to start pulling your own weight around here, dude." Lyra gasped, eyes wide with surprise, and looked up at Everett. He turned to her, his voice colder. "What's the matter, Lyra? You got a problem with that, honey?" She hesitated, then stammered. "Well, it's just, Matt doesn't earn enough to cover everything when we hang out. He's barely making it between his car payments and rent. We've always helped each other out. Why change things now?" Everett narrowed his eyes. "We're adults, Lyra. We all have jobs, and we're all responsible for ourselves, right?" She nodded and whispered, "Yes." "Exactly," Everett said firmly. "So, when we're together, we should all pitch in. And when we're not, everyone should pay their own way. Look, normally when someone's a guest, they at least offer to help out, even if it's not expected. But with us, it's different. Wherever we are, whether it's here or at Matt's place, you two are off having fun while I'm stuck cooking, serving, cleaning up, and paying for everything. This isn't an equal partnership, and frankly, I'm tired of it." The mood turned sour, and the evening quickly descended into an uncomfortable mess of accusations, hurt feelings, and tense silences. Everett wasn't quite ready to reveal the full extent of why he had taken such a hard stance, but they knew something was eating at him. Over the next 2 weeks, he watched Lyra and Matt like a hawk. Every time they were together, he saw them kissing, touching, acting like they couldn't keep their hands off each other. Twice in 1 week and 3 times the next, Everett managed to snap even more pictures of them having sex during work hours. It sickened him. By his count, Lyra and Matt were having more sex than he and Lyra had ever had, even before the affair came to light. It was clear. Matt was getting more than his share of what Lyra had to offer. By the end of the second week, Everett had made up his mind. On Friday, he marched into his boss's office. "Mr. Huxley," he began, "I've been looking over some numbers, and I think we could significantly boost profits if we shut down the beach rental store and let Matt go." Mr. Huxley raised an eyebrow, looking at Everett sharply. "Matt's your friend, isn't he? Why would you recommend closing his store and firing him? We could use an extra pair of hands here in the main rental center. Wouldn't that be a better solution than closing the store and letting your friend go?" Everett leaned forward, placing a folder of figures on Mr. Huxley's desk. "I understand where you're coming from, sir. But in this case, keeping Matt on would be a mistake." He opened the folder and pointed to the numbers. "First off, while the beach store performs well during peak tourist season, it barely covers operating costs the rest of the year. In fact, if we only operated from mid-April to mid-September, we'd capture 89% of its yearly profits. So I suggest we either lease the building or sell it outright. If you decide not to sell, we could close the store during the off-season and just run it for 5 months. I've crunched the numbers for each scenario, and either option would save us money. You could even consider selling part of the lot and keeping space for a mobile store to run during the peak season. That way, you're earning from the lease and maximizing profits during the busy months. Selling the property outright would also give us the capital to invest in more equipment or increase our interest income. And finally," Everett hesitated for a moment before continuing, "I believe Matt's continued employment would be detrimental to the company. His personal life and poor work habits have already started to interfere with his job. Keeping him on would be a liability." Everett leaned forward and slid an envelope across Mr. Huxley's desk. He continued, "I've discovered that Matt has been closing the store during working hours to have sex with a woman in the stockroom. He's been collecting pay for time he wasn't working. essentially stealing from the business. I've documented 7 occasions in the last 2 weeks where the store was shut down for almost an hour in the middle of the afternoon, on top of his regular lunch breaks. Everett took a breath and added, "These unauthorized closures have cost the business, both in potential sales and rentals, and I can't work alongside him any longer. This isn't an ultimatum, sir, but if Matt stays on, I'll be looking for another job." Mr. Huxley's face twisted in shock. "What? I can't believe this. You, Matt, and Lyra have been more than friends. You've been like family for years." "Yeah," Everett said with a bitter edge. "That's what I thought too, but I've recently found out things aren't what they seemed. Matt's definitely no friend of mine, and Lyra won't be my wife for much longer. The envelope contains all the reasons why." Mr. Huxley frowned, giving Everett a long, hard look before opening the envelope. As soon as he pulled out the first photo, his eyes widened, and he sharply inhaled. He flipped through the images quickly, then looked up at Everett, his voice softer. "Son, I don't even know what to say. I understand why you don't want to work with Matt anymore, and I understand why you're leaving Lyra. But closing the beach rental store, are you sure that's not just revenge?" Everett sighed heavily. "I knew you'd wonder about that. Look, I'd be lying if I said this situation didn't affect my thinking. But from a business standpoint, closing that store makes sense. Any accountant would agree. I suggest we have our accounting firm review my numbers, but I'm confident they'll back me up. That store barely turns a profit over the year, and the money tied up in it could be put to better use elsewhere. By my calculations, the store only adds about $600 a month to your bottom line. If we sold the property or even just rented it out, we'd see much better returns." Mr. Huxley nodded thoughtfully, still flipping through the photos, as he said, "All right, let's have the accountants take a look." As it turned out, the accounting firm was even harsher in its assessment than Everett had been. After including depreciation and insurance costs, they determined that the store was actually running at a loss outside of peak tourist season. In the end, Mr. Huxley agreed with Everett's recommendation. The store was closed, and Matt was fired. On the same day Matt was terminated, Everett instructed his lawyer to serve Lyra with divorce papers. He spent the morning moving out of the rented house and into a small apartment within walking distance of work. As he settled back into the routine at the rental center, his phone rang. It was Lyra. He debated answering, knowing the conversation wouldn't be pleasant, but in the end, he picked up. "Hello, Lyra," he said, his voice tight. "What do you want?" Surprisingly, her tone wasn't the angry rant he expected. "Everett," she began, "did you know about all this? Why didn't you tell us Mr. Huxley was going to close the store and fire Matt? I thought we were friends. How could you let that happen? Couldn't you at least have convinced him to move Matt to the store you work in? He was already behind on rent and car payments. Now he's got no way to catch up. I told him he could move in with us until he gets back on his feet. Can you leave work early and help him move?" Everett's jaw clenched. "No, Lyra, I won't help him move. And I don't work with Matt because I caught him closing the store during business hours when he wasn't even there. The store wasn't making enough money to stay open, so Mr. Huxley decided to close it. That's the situation. Now, I've got work to do." He hung up before she could respond. Half an hour later, the phone rang again. This time, Everett regretted picking up immediately. Lyra was screaming before he even got a word in. "Everett, how could you do this to us? You got Matt fired, didn't you? And now you're divorcing me too? How can you just cut us both out of your life like this? We've all been together for so long. How can you just drop us like we don't matter?" Everett's voice hardened. "How could I? How could you, Lyra? You cheated on me with Matt. How could you not expect me to get rid of him, and you both?" "What?" Lyra's voice cracked with indignation. "I wasn't cheating on you. I never have, and I never would. What makes you think that? Maybe it's because I've seen you and Matt together. Maybe because I've seen you both being way too close, crossing lines that no one should in a committed relationship. What do you think that led me to believe?" "Everett, I swear, I never let anything happen between me and Matt, not once." Everett's voice was cold as he replied, "Then what exactly do you call what I saw, Lyra? That wasn't being faithful." Lyra hesitated. "Well, I guess it was something, but I always saw it as, I don't know, just a connection, like what you and I have. Oh, Everett, how could you not understand? It's always been us, the three of us. We've been together since forever. You've known that from the start. I've always cared deeply about both of you. I thought you understood Matt and I shared something special. Just like you and I do. You're not really thinking about leaving me because of Matt, are you? She continued, her voice trembling with emotion. Everett, I love you. I care about Matt too, but you've always been my choice for a husband. You're the one who can provide stability for us. Matt, well, he's different. He brings something unique into our lives, something that makes us whole. The three of us, we're a team. You take care of things, I nurture, and Matt, he brings joy and balance. It's always been this way. Everett shook his head, disbelief clouding his expression. If Matt is so important to you, why did you marry me? Lyra sighed. Because you were the responsible one. You can provide for us when we have kids, give them the life they need. He's just not in that place. But he's still part of this. He's part of our family. We all work together as a unit. That's what I've always believed. Everett stood there for a moment, anger simmering beneath the surface. No, Lyra, I don't see it that way. I never did. He ended the call abruptly, his hands trembling. How could he have missed this all along? He was furious. Not only at her, but at himself for not seeing the truth sooner. It didn't take long for Lyra to invite Matt to move in with her after Everett left. Even then, Matt struggled to pay his bills. 2 months after the separation, he showed up at Everett's work, looking desperate. Everett was ready to throw him out. But before he could say a word, Matt blurted, Dude, I need your help. They're going to take my car, man. Lyra helped me last month, but we're tapped out now. Can you loan me the money to cover it? Everett blinked in disbelief. You show up here after everything that's happened, and you have the nerve to ask me for a loan? Get out of here before I lose my temper. Matt held his hands up in a defensive gesture. Whoa, man, relax. Yeah, maybe things got weird between us, but I thought you were okay with how things were. We've always been tight, right? I need your help now, and we can figure the rest out later. Everett forced a tight smile. You know what? Maybe I can help you after all. Let's head over to the bank, and we'll take care of this. Matt's face lit up, relieved. I knew I could count on you, man. Thanks. Seriously. They headed to the bank that held Matt's car loan, where they sat down with a loan officer. After they explained the situation, Everett leaned forward and said, I understand Matt is behind on his payments. I've agreed to step in and take over the payments to prevent any further issues. The loan officer looked uncertain. I'm not sure if that's something we can do without more details. Matt quickly interrupted. Wait a minute, dude. I didn't say I was giving up the car. I just need help with the payments. Everett turned to Matt calmly. Matt, I'm offering to take over the loan and handle everything from here on out. That way, you don't have to worry about the payments anymore. Matt's expression relaxed, and he smiled. Oh, okay, that sounds good. Let's do it. The loan officer gathered Everett's information and ran a quick credit check. After a few minutes, she smiled and said, I see no issues with you taking over the payments on Mr. Tremont's vehicle, Mr. Holt. I can also help process the new title for you to submit to the state. Let me grab some forms, and we'll get this squared away. She stood up and went to retrieve the paperwork. As soon as she left, Matt shifted in his seat, his expression turning serious. Hey, dude, what's all this about changing the title to your name? I told you, I can't lose my car. Everett leaned back casually. Relax, Matt. It's just part of the process since I'm taking over the payments. You know how the banks and the government are. It's all about the paperwork. Matt sighed in relief, nodding. Yeah, I don't really get how all that works anyway. I was just worried about my ride. We're good. Within 45 minutes, Matt had signed over the car, and Everett settled the overdue balance. As they headed back to Everett's truck, Matt seemed to revert to his old self, cheerful and carefree. It took everything Everett had not to let his frustration boil over. Once they got back to the store, Matt hopped out and hurried around to the driver's side. He grinned and said, Hey man, I scored some great stuff yesterday. How about we hang out and relax for a bit? We can celebrate. Everett shook his head. I can't right now, Matt. I need to finish up the paperwork for your car. Matt shrugged. All right, no problem. Catch you later, dude. He waved as he drove off, leaving Everett to finish handling the title transfer at the DMV. Everett walked into the DMV with a spring in his step, thrilled that everything had gone according to plan. Once the transaction was complete, he couldn't help but smile as he left the building. 2 weeks later, Everett received the final divorce papers in the mail. As divorces go, it was straightforward. He and Lyra had similar incomes, so there were no financial obligations to settle. They each kept their personal belongings, vehicles, and other assets. Everett signed off on the lease for their old beachfront home, feeling a mixture of relief and nostalgia. He didn't miss Lyra, but he did miss that house. Late that Saturday night, technically early Sunday morning, Everett decided to pay a quiet visit to his former home. He rode one of the rental beach bikes to the house, carefully unlocking the door with the key Lyra had never asked him to return. As he stepped inside, Everett smiled. There, sitting on the table, were the keys to Matt's Hellcat. He picked them up, but hesitated before leaving. Where's the other set? He wondered. He checked the cabinet where Lyra usually kept her purse and, sure enough, found a second set of Hellcat keys attached to her keychain. He pocketed them and quietly slipped back outside. Everett made his way to the Hellcat in the driveway and opened the door. The car was loud, really loud, and he knew starting it without drawing attention would be nearly impossible. Grimacing, he turned the key and the engine roared to life. What a sound, he thought. Trying to keep the noise to a minimum, he backed out of the driveway and headed for his place. He planned to return with his truck later to pick up the bike he had left behind. The next day, after a quiet lunch, Everett's phone rang. Matt was on the other end, speaking so quickly Everett could barely understand him. Everett, dude, someone stole my car, man. I can't believe it. What am I gonna do? Everett's tone remained calm. Chill, Matt. There's nothing I can do for you. After listening to Matt's frantic rant for a few more moments, Everett finally hung up, a smile spreading across his face. By this time, Matt had managed to land a part-time job with a pool company. The following week, Everett made a point of driving the Hellcat past the business when Matt was getting off work. On Thursday, as Matt was getting into Lyra's car, Everett rolled by and gave the horn a quick tap. He caught a glimpse of Matt's face twisted in fury as the Hellcat rumbled down the street. The roar of the engine easily drowned out Matt's angry shouts as Everett disappeared into traffic, leaving the two of them behind. Late on a Saturday morning, Everett was busy waxing the Hellcat when a city patrol car pulled into the lot behind him. The officer stepped out and approached him. "Are you Everett Holt?" the officer asked. "Yes, officer." "Is there a problem?" Everett responded. "Is this your vehicle, sir?" the officer asked, glancing at the Dodge. Everett chuckled. "Well, yes, it is. Although technically it belongs to me and the bank." The officer tensed slightly and continued. "Can I see the registration and proof of insurance, please?" "Sure thing," Everett replied. He opened the car door, rummaged through the glove compartment, and produced the requested documents. As he handed them over, he asked again, "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer took the paperwork and said, "I'll just be a moment." He walked back to his patrol car to run the information. A few minutes later, he returned, handing the documents back to Everett. "Mr. Holt, we received a report from a Mr. Matthias Tremont stating that his vehicle was stolen. The vehicle identification number. He gave us matches this car. He mentioned that he saw you driving it and asked us to recover it. However, the registration and DMV records show that you own this vehicle. Could you explain the situation?" Everett leaned casually against the car, smiling. "Well, officer, Mr. Tremont did own this car at one point, but he couldn't keep up with the payments, so I agreed to take them over to help him out. We went to the bank and I took over the loan and the ownership of the vehicle. I'm not sure what his issue is, but I suspect he might have been confused, whether from stress or something else, when he made the report. We used to be friends, but after my wife and I divorced, he sided with her and, well, we're not as close as we used to be. I even let him keep the car for 2 weeks after the transfer so he could figure out alternative transportation." The officer nodded. "So, you're saying Mr. Tremont may have misunderstood the situation and is trying to cause trouble because of your divorce?" "I wouldn't go that far, officer," Everett said with a shrug. "I just think he might have forgotten the deal we made." "All right then," the officer said. "Sorry to have bothered you. Have a good day, Mr. Holt." The next afternoon, Everett was relaxing by the pool when he noticed Lyra and Matt storming into view. Before he could stand, they tipped his chair over, dumping him onto the hot concrete. "Dude," Matt said angrily, "why'd you take my car? I need it back, man. Hand over the keys." Everett dusted himself off, calmly standing up. "You came to me asking for help, and I helped you because we used to be friends. You signed the car over to me so it wouldn't be repossessed. Now, it's mine. And honestly, I'm not complaining. This Hellcat is a sweet ride, even if it's not the truck I'm used to. Besides, it's a real head-turner, you know? Kind of seems fair in the end. You've got your car, and I've got mine. I think I came out ahead, though. At least I don't have to worry about this car leaving me for someone else without my permission." Lyra let out a sharp gasp and started crying silently, while Matt stared at Everett, dumbfounded. "Man, that's just cold," Matt muttered. Everett looked them both in the eye. "Yeah, it is what it is. Now get out of here before I call the police. I don't want to see either of you again."